because Riri has kind of built herself up to be a person who can just rely on herself and can solve all of her problems alone, the people in her life are not used to worrying about her. And so it takes a long time for the people around her to reach the level of concern that is appropriate for the kinds of problems that are arising in her life. It's like her psyche was calling for help.
Yeah.
And Natalie shows up as a physical manifestation of that, not just as a person who can help her with her problem solving, which she does, but also a person who is like her emotional support. A lot of the feminist representation that we get in films is through this like girl power thing. Look at them, they're strong and they're overcoming and they're handling things. Like that's kind of like Captain Marvel. And I think the reason why sometimes those things don't land with Black women is because like being seen as strong and capable isn't always the struggle that Black women have. A lot of times the struggle Black women have is that we are assumed to be strong and not in need of assistance in situations where we do need it. Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast. My name is Esther.
And I'm Adrian.
And today we're here to talk to you all about the newest MCU TV show, Ironheart.
Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about the show. So if you haven't watched it, don't watch this because we're going to be spoiling a lot. Really good.
Pleasantly surprised. I was a little nervous because they were not promoting it. And I was like, uh-oh, because sometimes that can be a sign of how much effort they put into something. But I feel like this is a very well done show. I feel like it was very well put together. I feel like it had awesome characters, awesome acting, awesome story. Just everything.
It's interesting because when it first dropped, the critical reviews on Rotten Tomatoes were like 67, 68. I guess the way that it works is that earlier access comes and then more critics get access to it, like as the show kind of continues. It shot up to like 86, which I was like, that feels a little bit more accurate.
Makes a lot more sense to me.
Them ending it on that cliffhanger saved them a bit, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree.
This feels like an actual season 1 of a good TV show.
Even if they had ended it with like she says no to Mephisto or whatever, I don't think that they could have done anything to like defeat Mephisto. Right. No. But like, even if they had kind of like tied up her story as like she decides not, like she says no to him, whatever, I still think even with that, this show handled the 6 episode arc better than like almost any other MCU show with just 6 episodes, I think. Like, it still would have felt to me complete, and it didn't feel rushed to me at any point. The story's scope and size was appropriate for the number of episodes that they had.
Yeah.
What the show shows us is that the fact that she's such a genius has made her believe that she can be completely self-sufficient. Because she is such a genius and because she relies on herself so much, it's also made it so that the people in her life treat her like she's self-sufficient. Like, you kind of see that in the way that her family responds to her, even when things are obviously going wrong.
Yeah.
Like, as the show goes on, her mom becomes a little bit more concerned, but it takes a while for her mom to reach the level of concern that you would expect a mom to reach with what seem like with the hints and clues that she's getting. Like, number one, like, your daughter gets kicked out of MIT for doing something illegal.
Yeah.
And there was like barely even, it kind of just happened and she was like, I heard you got kicked out of school. And then that was it. And I think all of that kind of showed that, like, because Riri has kind of built herself up to be a person who can just rely on herself and can solve all of her problems alone, the people in her life are not used to worrying about her. And so it takes a long time for the people around her to reach the level of concern that is appropriate for the kinds of problems that are arising in her life. And I really, really like that they did that with her character, because that type of hyper independence is something that a lot of Black women struggle with. That whole like strong, you know, independent Black woman trope, this idea that like you don't need any help and like, you know, you people don't need to help you, like you are self-reliant no matter what, you can handle anything. And so Black women take on a lot of things because they care a lot about caring for other people, sometimes at the expense of themselves. And that's basically what we see happening with Riri. And I like that they went this route because like a lot of the feminist representation that we get in films is through this like girl power thing. It's like, look at them, they're strong and they're overcoming and they're handling things. Like that's kind of like Captain Marvel. And I think the reason why sometimes those things don't land with Black women is because like being seen as strong and capable isn't always the struggle that Black women have. A lot of times the struggle Black women have is that we are assumed to be strong and not in need of assistance in situations where we do need it. So I really like that this is the route that they took for Riri's character arc.
Yeah, and you see her wrestling with it also in moments where she feels like she is out of control. She hasn't been using the muscles of vulnerability.
Exactly.
Right. Even something as small as she's not able to fall asleep naturally. She has to fall asleep inside the suit. Those little instances, I appreciate it. Like tying it to Tony Stark is something that I think is such a crucial point here. Because one, obviously in the comics, she's very much tied to Tony Stark. Like Tony kind of brings her in as like a protege when he realizes how intelligent she is. Yeah. But obviously RDJ is just too expensive. They're not gonna bring him out on no TV show. So
he's dead.
Yeah.
So
the conversations that I have seen surrounding Riri Williams and Tony Stark are actually kind of frustrating for a number of
There's that one line that people keep
Tony Stark, a bunch of scraps in the cave.
Yeah.
What's so frustrating is that we do not get Iron Man if Tony Stark did not have 30 plus years of untapped wealth to feed his intellect and curiosity. I think that is the portion of Iron Man's story that people just kind of overlooked. You don't get Iron Man if he didn't have resources to keep using his muscles, his intelligent muscles, his muscle in knowledge. And I feel like people are saying like, the critique that Riri is trying to give for Tony is that it's all about money. No, you guys are missing the point. And I think that whether it's intentionally or not, but what Riri is saying is that her capability and her qualifications in being so intelligent are stifled because she does not have unlimited resources in the way that Tony does, and not just resources like in funding with the school, because she was pettifogging a little bit, but there is some truth to it, because realistically Tony was able to build whatever he wanted, and he profited off of that. There were no constraints of a college or a school or a dean or a chair of a specific department. He made war weapons. And I think that's a little bit more so of what Riri is trying to get at. The confinements that you are placing on me, whether she's right or wrong in terms of what her motives are, that is true, because those confinements did not exist for Tony. And the fact that he was able to spend the first half of his life building whatever he wanted, pursuing whatever idea that he wanted, does matter when it comes to being able to scratch that itch when it came to their intelligence. And I feel like people don't want to admit that.
It doesn't make him less smart.
No.
It just means he had the genius and he had the resources necessary to fuel that.
Yes.
With no end in sight. The other thing I found really interesting about like her backstory compared to Tony Stark's is that their material resources and the conditions in which they were brought up also kind of impacts what motivates them in pursuing all of this curiosity and this and using all of this genius in what they create, right? Because what we see is that because Tony Stark was born not only as a genius but also wealthy and white and a man, he just automatically came into a world that had no limitations, that there was nothing in front of him blocking him. There was no issues. And so, like you said, he immediately starts utilizing his genius to just pursue more wealth, no matter what, right? There wasn't any sort of like care for other people that was sort of fueling what he was doing, because he just didn't see the need. For him, the world was limitless and everything was good. Yeah. But what you see for Riri is that her genius paired with the conditions that she was brought up in, being black, being a woman, and coming from a working class family in Chicago, her genius highlights the limitations because she can imagine all of these possibilities, but she can't bring them to life, especially when she needs them the most, like what happens with her stepdad and with Natalie. And so it fuels her in a completely different way. She is searching for a way to protect the people that she cares about. She's doing it out of that desire partially. I think there's like another thing, but I'll get into that later.
Sure.
But like you see how that it just kind of, it makes their arcs just have to be different, right? Like, whereas, yes, you have like the classic scene where Tony, you know, he builds his suit in isolation in a cave in a moment of extreme vulnerability, because in order for him to see that the world needed fixing, he had to be put in a position where he was helpless, and he had to see the impact of what he had been doing before. Like, that's what he needed. He had to be, basically humbled. But that's not the case for Riri. Riri builds her suit in community with other people because that's what she needed to see. She needed to see that like her community and her people, that doesn't just have to be a liability or something that she's constantly worried about. That can also be a strength that she can utilize to make herself and the people around her safer. But I really appreciate the way that their arcs, I don't know how it goes in the comics, but I appreciate how the show is highlighting the difference in their arcs because of where they start.
How you react to not the storytelling, not the writing, but the characterization of Riri Williams is really a litmus test on your bias when it comes to characters of color, because the parallels that she has with Tony Stark in so many instances in their story is borderline identical. They both lose their father or father figure. They both present a high level of arrogance that is masked with a lot of insecurity that is tied to the loss of their father. We see it with Riri when she says, like, you know, when people ask her why she made the suit, because I could. But as the story unfolds, we realize that's not the case. The same thing with Iron Man, that him wanting to be that, so much of that is tied to his father. They also make very questionable decisions throughout first two chapters. I'm assuming we would get more of Riri, but Iron Man was consistently making questionable choices even after he comes out as Iron Man. The irony, I feel like, in these two characters is that a lot of these male fans were not saying Tony was unlikable, but they're saying that for Riri. And to see how you were able to see the humanity in Tony Stark's character, but you immediately deem Riri as unlikable, is fascinating to me. Borderline a case study, because you aren't even giving her the ability to grow over time as a character in the MCU, versus it was it was almost implied the second we saw Tony on the screen. His character arc was something that was just universally agreed upon, that we're going to see this character grow over the course of the years that we have him. That double standard, I think, is what's more frustrating than most of the conversations that I'm seeing about Riri. You all are not allowing her to currently be a flawed character growing into something better. The other thing that I feel like is frustrating about the show that ties into the review bombing that we saw from people earlier on when it first dropped, specifically like the fan ones, the frustration that we saw people have with some of the queer representation in this story. That's like, why did you have to put them in there? Give me a scenario where they have brought in queer characters and you didn't have an issue with it. Name me one where you feel like it isn't forced. And I remember I asked someone in our comment section and they couldn't give an answer. That should be a tell, not about studios or about TV shows and movies, but about your unwillingness to never see it as something that isn't forced.
The reception of Riri is just a reflection of the reception of Black women. Tony Stark and Riri Williams are both characters that don't make the attempt to be likable. Like, that's really what it is.
Right.
They because they are so smart. Like, they're just so smart, and they know every time they step anywhere that they are the smartest people in the room. They don't make the attempt to try to appease to people's egos.
Yeah.
And All it is that people are very accustomed to that type of attitude and ego coming from men. And they are not accustomed to that type of attitude coming from women, especially Black women. And that plays out in the real world all the time, right? Like the reception of men in leadership positions versus women in leadership positions. There's all sorts of studies about this that show that like people don't respond the same way to men who are extremely confident and high performing and don't try to play that down and don't try to be humble, versus when women do the same thing.
Yeah.
Because women are socialized to try to humble themselves, to try to make themselves smaller so that the people around them feel more comfortable. And when women, especially women of color, and in this case a Black woman, don't do that, it makes people uncomfortable. And that's all that's happening with Riri. It's just the same thing.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about Natalie. First of all, I'm very happy to see the actress getting work, Lyric Ross.
This Is Us.
Yes, when she was in This Is Us, I was like, this girl is talented. I feel like what she was in the show for Riri is she was basically like a physical manifestation of Riri's need for help and support. Like Riri creates her subconsciously, right? Without realizing it. Like it's like her psyche was calling for help.
Yeah.
And Natalie shows up as a physical manifestation of that, not just as a person who can help her with her problem solving, which she does, but also a person who is like her emotional support, who cares about her emotional support and well-being. She kind of fills both of those gaps for Riri. And she's one of the only people who from the very beginning is sensing that Riri needs help and voices it to her face out loud. Like, you can't do this alone. Like, you actually need me. And not only does she do that, but she forces it. Like when Riri tries to say no, she doesn't just say, okay, which is what Riri's mom does for much of the show. Mm-hmm. Like she senses something's off. She goes to help. And when Riri's like, I got this, she's like, okay. Natalie never does that. Natalie makes sure every single time that even if Riri refuses to help, she's going to give it anyways. Yeah. And I feel like her creation was like Riri's subconscious knowing and understanding that this is needed. I really find it so fitting that when Riri reaches the point in the show where she understands that she needs help and support and cannot do this alone, that it is her mom and Natalie who are the ones to provide that support and not Xavier. And I only say that because I feel like for Black women, the safe space for Black women is like 9 times out of 10 other Black women. Like if you talk to Black women when they're like in need of healing, when they're in need of help, when they're in need of support, 9 times out of 10 the home that they're going to is other Black women. A lot of the times we are the only other people that we can feel consistently will have our back. And you see that voice online all of the time, right? And that's not to say that we don't have other people in our lives who care about us. But I think like at a societal level, there's this feeling that like the people who we know we can always count on to have our backs is each other. And so I really, really liked that in that moment when she finally comes to a place where she's like, I cannot do this alone. It's other Black women who come to her aid. And not just in that moment, but when she goes to her mom before and they go to the store, again, it's other Black women. It's Cree Summers. So happy to see her. When they introduced this crew, I was like, this is fantastic because it's a crew full of Black and brown women and queer folks who are all geniuses and highly skilled at their craft, but overlooked.
Yes.
And I feel like that is so fitting because here is the thing. If you go into any neighborhood or school in the hood, you will find people who are clearly geniuses, who are clearly like extremely, extremely highly skilled at something that they are doing, but they just have not been given the opportunities, the resources, the recognition to direct it into or like turn it into a form of success that is well respected by society writ large. Like that's just it's just undeniable. Like people have people in their family that is like, this guy is extremely smart. He could be doing a whole bunch of stuff with this. He just hasn't been given that chance, hasn't been given that opportunity. Like, yes, they might be utilizing their skill sets in ways that are frowned upon by society, but like part of that is because of where they are. Think about Slug. She is so technologically gifted. Like, if she had been given an opportunity or a doorway to be doing something simpler and less dangerous and less terrifying, but just as lucrative, do we not think that she would be doing that? Like, I'm just really happy that they chose not to just make them like these evil people, because like the underlying current of the show is wealth disparity. Like, it's wealth disparity, and it's the sense of powerlessness that it creates.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I feel like they had Riri say all that stuff about Tony Stark at the beginning, because for Riri and for the Hood and all of those people, that is the underlying thing. It's that these are people who are extremely capable, but they are existing in a system that it continuously just always puts roadblocks in their way.
Yes.
We see that play out for Riri.
Yes.
I think we can assume that the same is probably true for the rest of the people in this crew. And then we also see it's a little bit different for the Hood because of his backstory. But again, similarly, it's just this sense of like powerlessness that comes with not having the resources necessary to fulfill the potential that you know that you have. I know when she says like, I'm building it because I can, like part of it is kind of BS because there is like some trauma and stuff like underneath that. But I think also part of it is like, yeah, I do feel like she does these things very recklessly without thinking because she's trying to prove that she can do it.
Yes.
Like we saw that in Wakanda Forever when they found her and they talked to her about the machine that she built to detect vibranium, she was like, my professor said I couldn't do it, so I built it to show that I could. She didn't think about the fact that like what will it do, honestly? Like if you create a machine that can detect vibranium, like come on, they're not just gonna let it sit in a lab somewhere. It's that same thing. It's like she's not thinking about the consequences of her actions, partially because this recklessness is fueled by the sense of like the world doesn't see me and I need them to see what I can do.
Yeah.
That's the undercurrent of all of this. I think it's really funny that when the Hood and his crew go out and they do all of these heists and stuff, the thing that he's asking for is partial ownership in companies who have utilized his community, their community, to make their wealth. Mm-hmm. What they're asking for is partial ownership because in a way, are they not owed it?
Yeah.
Honestly. I just found that really interesting, and I feel like so much of the story is fueled by that, like the wealth disparity, the sense of helplessness that comes with it, and the different ways that all these characters are trying to maneuver through it to feel recognized and seen and like they have some control over their circumstances. And
I feel like this is the conversation surrounding like DEI that I think gets left out. I feel like white people struggle with believing people of color when they talk about the roadblocks that they're experiencing. I feel like when you bring up the examples of characters like Riri Williams or even other characters in the group that the Hood creates of like, if given the chance, they would be just as good as their white counterpart. That understanding of they are equally qualified, except one of them had an easier path, is a reality that I feel like a lot of white Americans struggle to accept as something that can exist.
I also think part of the pushback is I think that people think that we're trying to absolve people of accountability for the decisions that they make.
Yeah.
I don't know about people. Me personally, that's not what I'm doing. Partially because I think that's a disservice to us, like to say that we didn't have any choice and we don't have autonomy and we don't have I don't think that about Black people. I think that Black people have the autonomy and can make different choices. And yes, if you're making poor choices, there is some personal responsibility. There is some personal responsibility in that, right? Because yes, in many instances, you probably could have done something else, right? Case in point, Riri at MIT cheating. Okay,
right.
Riri ain't have to do that, and Riri deserve to get kicked out of school. You can say she needs to own that and take ownership of that, and also understand that a rich white kid in her position would never have even thought to do that because they would have never needed to.
Yes.
Like, that's the difference. It's like, it's not that she's not responsible for the choice that she made. It's that a person who had more material resources at hand would have never even had to think about doing that. It would have never even crossed their mind because it's not necessary.
It's not a choice they ever have to consider.
Exactly.
Only other thing that I would say is just the theme of child and father you see showing up quite often. You see it with Riri, you see it with the Hood, you see it with Obadiah's son, and how they chose to explore how losing their father impacted them in various ways, and how that essentially changed the trajectory of where a lot of these characters go.
That's very true.
And what they needed or could have needed in order to heal properly.
The very last thing I was going to say was, I think I've seen like one other creator point this out, but there is a lot of conversation being about like Ryan Coogler produced it, and Ryan Coogler did produce it, and we are grateful. And that's what happens when you get a seat at the table and you use it to help other people. I just think we need to put some respect on the showrunner's name. I've never heard of her before, but I am tapped in now. Chinaka Hodge. Showrunner, I think she wrote some episodes, or wrote many of them, I'm not sure, but she's like the creative force behind the show, and just major props to her. She deserves it.
Let us know what you guys think about Ironheart. Have you seen it? Do you plan on watching it? Let us know what you feel about each episode in the comments below. And with that, we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace.